Let me please invite our very first panelist. We have with us architect Smaran Mallesh, who's a co-founder, partner, and principal architect from Cadence Architects based in Bengaluru. Well, up next we have with us architect Sanchit Arora, who's a principal architect and concept design head at RENESA Architecture Design Interior Studio based in Delhi. And our final speaker, we have with us architect Pronit Nath, who's the founder and principal architect from Urban Studio based in Mumbai.
Good evening, Shraddha and team, and thank you for inviting me and asking me to set up this discussion. The problem having Studio Lotus go before you is they've said all the cool stuff, and this idea of the practice, and we're going to touch upon a lot of that in this discussion as well. But I'm going to start with a fairly open question, which is really what goes into the makings of a great practice. And if just for a moment we were to detach this idea of the practice and the practitioner, what then goes into shaping a great practice? What gives it its sense of purpose and meaning? And that's a little of what we're going to speak about today, I think, what we want to touch upon. And really, I think there's a lot that goes into the making of a thoughtful practice. And just hold on to that word for a moment. What exactly is a thoughtful practice? For me, a thoughtful practice is one that is consistently producing great work over a period of time, and somehow has this ability to sort of step back every now and then and see if there were very pivotal moments in the life of their practice that have somehow influenced them and continues to influence the way they think and work today. So we have three fantastic designers here. I personally follow their work. And I thought it would be great to get them to then reflect on their own practice. So we had this conversation before we set up the panel. And I was asking them if there was a way they could pin down 4 anchoring moments in the lives of their practices and present a practice timeline. It would be great to kind of understand why they thought about those pivotal moments. So the format of this discussion is really set up in such a way. So Pronit, Sanchit, and Smaran will present in that order. It's very quick presentations. There will be practice timelines, and then there'll be these marker moments in the lives of their practice. It's unfortunate that we had to narrow it down and pin it down to 4. I know there was a lot more to talk about, but it's a start, I think, of this conversation. So let's get going. Yeah, it'd be great to continue this conversation after they present. So Pronit, over to you.
Thanks. So yeah, when you spoke to us about pivotal moments for architects, for me, it's all about, pivotal moments can be anything. It can be setbacks, as well as breakthroughs, lucky breaks, all of that. So, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, that's just a thing of what we studied and what we have to do in our everyday practice, right? In terms of what it was just like a quick graphic that we had many years ago. So that's just the timeline of different projects. But I mean, when I look back, it's not so much about the project as much as the ideas. That for us, the idea, for any architect, the idea is always bigger than the project. And it's of course how successful we are in kind of modulating that idea, or achieving their idea, or building upon the idea for the next project. So sometimes 2 different projects are actually the same for us because it's the same idea, but different programs, different scales. So we started, of course, our first pivotal moment is your first project. For me, it was, I was still studying. I was in the 5th year. I went back to 4th and 5th year and started doing a master's. So I repeated my 4th and 5th. So, and then I got an opportunity to do, and my first project was a restaurant, which was also a very difficult thing to do. This is way back in 2001, but then after that I came back, I worked for some time, and I started my own practice in 2003. We did a slew of hospitality projects. We just about started building, but we were just kind of getting, you do what you get, and you try and formulate something, but more about form and your ideas of still modulating about materials. And then we got a lucky break. We presented at CEPT, and we got picked up by a client, Anupam Podar, and he gave us like 2 hotels. We'd never done anything like that before. Again, to do a project in Jaipur, in Rajasthan, the heart of India, and to do a contemporary kind of Indian project was our key. So the project was very well received. Everything was local, all within, everything was handmade. We used a lot of craft with contemporary techniques of course we are working on the computer, using all the techniques that we've learned, but in the end it's all by hand. So that was great fun to kind of work with. Also we worked a lot with color. The project here was very well received as well, so it was our biggest break, but it was also our biggest setback, because what happened was that the clients had a fallout with the financiers, and then the hotel just it didn't kind of run well, you know. So for architects, it's very important that the projects run well. I'd rather have a toned down design but runs well, that's more successful. You know, for us it was the other way around. The design was so well received, but the project didn't run well, so we didn't get the traction, you know, in that sense. But that's pivotal, you know,
yeah,
in that sense. So sorry. We also got, again, I'm showing 2 projects here because for us it's the same project. That's why we're showing 2 projects. We got like for the same client, we had a resort project, and then we also got our first housing project. I mean, that was also close to our house, mid-income housing in Bombay, massive 6 lakh square feet. But this was all about the module. For us, this was a tented project in Rajasthan. And for both projects is extremely modular. It's all based on repetition. Repetition has rhythm, and then it's all based on economies of scale. So for example, the housing project is it's a 6 lakh square feet project based on 1 grid, 11 feet grid. Most expensive part of housing is the windows. We had 3,500 windows, where we kind of made one form which was repeated in the XY axis. So it was about efficiencies for housing, and the same thing was for the resort. It was 1 cube that started off with a 6 meter by 6 meter cube. And then we took the same cube, made that into a room. The same cube became the diagonally cut reception block through which you go, and then the onion arch, I mean the traditional Rajasthan arch, we kind of twisted to form the restaurant. So it was essentially the same module, and it was always the repetition of that one unit that made the project. So for us, that was the thing. Yeah. And then that was basically the kind of more pictures of the same housing unit that you see. We also use the grill because that's also a social thing in Bombay. Everybody uses the same grill. I mean, everybody adds their own grill into the windows. And it kind of, the whole idea is that housing projects in Bombay, they just look different on the first day and start disintegrating with time. For us, that was very important not to do that. Again, a new thing that that I'm kind of more intrigued by is like one material, one move projects, you know, especially for large interior projects. So like in this case, this is a club that we did, and we used the whole material. It was a 30,000 square feet club, and the entire material came free to us because we used, this was for Phoenix Market City in Chennai, and they import a lot of escalators and elevators. So they come in the OSB crates, you know. So all that material came free to us, and we used that material to, and the spaces have nothing to offer, no light, no view, commercial spaces, columns, capitals, all of that. So we just kind of changed the space to make it a more striated, vaulted space because we work with that material, and that became one space, and we kind of modulated that differently. More and more now with other moments that as we are getting bigger, or trying to do kind of bigger work just to get to dabble into scale, but also more commercial work, because you're working in cities, and cities also have ridiculous bylaws, right? And we're trying to formulate something that obviously we study that, but to have your own hidden agenda, really, to kind of, like the left one is again, it's a housing project in, again, mid-income in Thana and just outside Bombay, where we basically taking the Brise Soleil and use the balconies as fire decks. Yeah. This was the middle project, was a project in Chennai which we're doing. Again, this is because everything is based on FAR, has to be free, nobody's giving you anything. So the thing is, of course, you've seen green buildings everywhere, and we've all aspired to do that. But to achieve it in our system here, which doesn't allow you to do that, is something that we've tried to do and we are doing now. Again, these are based on NBC codes, fire decks, which then have a hidden agenda of having being able to open your windows. This is, of course, after COVID, so it's also well received. Also much more cheaper for clients. You don't have curtain walls to do that in India. And we achieved some portion of that. The first two are kind of on the boards right now, which should start next year. But the last one is in Surat, where this is a mixed-use clubhouse building, and we convinced the clients to do the same thing of having a living green facade. It was just like a test. For us, the test also becomes important for the larger project. In that
I was just also thinking that, the work seems to cut across many project types and scales, and that's something I want to come back to in a little bit. Maybe, Sanchit, I think the next one is yours. Sure. If you can just move the slides forward, please.
Sure, guys. Hi, guys. This is Sanchit Arora from RENESA Architects. Well, I'll quickly skim through it. The thing is that in terms of the studio, the experience that is on my right and on my left, it's of course as much as my age, I would say. But then, that is true, guys.
Watch it,
but then, honestly, the difference in the studio is that I was it was a sort of a dynasty duo-based studio where my father was heading the firm, and almost about a decade or so back, I took over the reins. And I think, honestly, as much as it looks really fancy to take over your father's office, honestly, it's just one inch, just closer to a World War III at home as well as at work. So, the idea of a firm or a practice that we talk, and honestly, this is where I differ from a lot of people, is it's because of your own team. You're nothing without the team, and honestly, I take pride in the team, and honestly, these are the guys who've been a part of the success and the part of the crest and the trough we go through. And I think people who are there for your happiness and your sadness are the team that kind of flows through your processes. And I think they have inculcated and vibed with our processes, and I think that's exactly what I've written, is nothing is possible without a teamwork. It's as simple as that, and I will not take anything away from it. If you see, that's my father, Sanjay Arora. He started the firm almost after 25 years of experience, and this was about 2005-06 when he started RENESA, and I joined him in 2014. So if you can see, the scales have varied quickly. If I say it has scaled from 1,000 square feet to lakhs and lakhs of square feet, where farmhouses to your press complexes, to your hospitality, to your commercial, to your farmhouses, to your many more aspects have been taken according. So as a firm, I don't get into that we are known for this niche. Of course, once you start doing one niche, you're known for that. But then, given the fact that we had to talk about the 4 pivotal movements of our firm, so I'll take you through those projects. You have these 4 projects. It was a tough call actually, because he told me not to, he was giving me a lot for not putting architecture, but we will. This is the Namgyal building in Delhi. This was for the King of Ladakh. Of course, I was a kid back then. I was almost about 12 years old when this was happening, but then I was there throughout the process. My father designed this building of course, this was started in about 1999. ended about 2005 or something, and then launched in 2006. Interestingly, it is at a cross section of, let's say, a Ziggurat meets the Ladakhi architecture, and honestly, it caught a lot of my attention when I was growing up. So honestly, once you are from that thought or school of thought of architecture being followed in your house, you have nothing. And I'm a single child, so I had nothing but, you know, like these pencils and pens and drafting sheets thrown in my house. So I think that is what caught all to me. So the next one, of course, was a very bold design, and my father wanted to throw me out of the firm straight away. This was the project we did. Of course, it got a lot of attention, but then, of course, as you grow old, your lines mature. But this was one of the initial projects that we did. Of course, it was a very bold move, but then eccentric and eclectic in its own way, but then it had done its job in terms of being a restaurant in Kanpur, so did the job. Then, of course, once you see the next bit is the recently done Seema Gujral store that we did in Delhi. This is where I feel was also another pivotal moment for us in terms of the retail design, where it was a parking lot for a place called Dhan Mill in Delhi, and where we changed it into a retail space. So another interesting space where we kind of crafted out a lot of detailing, very modern meets tradition. So how does that happen, and how does experience of an old school architect meets the conceptual vision of a new school architect is what is the amalgam and the thought process behind RENESA. This is another recent addition to one of our interiors project, because I was not allowed to put architecture. Thanks, Sujit. But then this is another place that we've done for a client who wanted a Kerala-based interiors, and I think the idea behind this was to not go overboard yet, be within the scape of detailing out wherever it's required, and how can we kind of traditionally create something which is practical and modern and functional in its own way for a house. So yeah, I mean, going through a whole process, these were the major steps that we went through in terms of the process of running the practice. I also still don't know what a practice means. Honestly, I'm also in the process, and not as my dad, honestly, he says the same. So it'll be interesting to see how others go, and then we go back to the conversation.
Yeah, we should talk about it a little bit more, but I continue to think that, I mean, we spoke about this briefly, is that you chose to put that first project in the timeline,
Yeah.
and then you have sort of markedly different projects subsequently. And I think it's interesting that you somehow feel that the legacy of the firm has influenced or shaped your thinking, you know, as you move forward. But hopefully we'll be able to talk about it a little bit more
Sure.
After Smaran finishes his presentation.
Hi guys, I'm Smaran, and we run a firm called Cadence in Bangalore with I have two other partners, founding partners, Narendra and Vikram. So I think you guys are familiar with the format where, you know, there's a timeline which starts from when the studio started, and then we were asked to pick 4 pivotal moments. But I thought it was very pertinent to show this slide. Believe me when I say this, but the guy sitting down is me. Of course, I look a lot more handsome now than I did back then. And the guy standing up and drafting is my partner Narendra. So if you're wondering where the third partner was, he was the one who shot the picture. So he's also there in the frame in some sense. This slide also was put to test how many architects are in the hall. Clearly not many, because this is the legendary technique of glass tracing that you did in school to kind of do your sheets quicker.
I did that.
But you know, I think
I did that.
We all did.
Yeah. No, because we're all contemporaries, so obviously you did this. So I think it's really important to understand, you know, we understood a lot of things when we did this. Our partnership came to the fore here. We understood how to manage real estate, that little piece of real estate. You know, we understand how we delegate work. We understood the properties of glass, transparency, translucency. You know, we understood the importance of light in architecture. We understood that history is the basis for all work. Hence, this Bannister Fletcher kept on the stool there with the light sitting on it. So, history of architecture, Bannister Fletcher, that's the only use we found for it. But anyway, moving on from this, we eventually started the firm because clearly we were compatible. We hoodwinked every teacher through school. So we started the firm, and the timeline to me implies two things. Clearly, there are moments that you come upon through the work you do. Maybe I'll get to that. But I think what the timeline's also important for us in a sense that I think peer recognition was very important to validate the way we were thinking. It's very simple in school. When you're doing work, you always have a professor telling you if something's right or not right, and you get out of school and you're doing work, and you're doing work through instinct, you're doing work through the way you see things, and then validation becomes really important in some sense. So peer validation was important for us. And that came through publication, that came through awards, that came through being part of exhibitions, both nationally and internationally. I think these moments formed key markers in our timeline. And of course, there was work all along, which I will get to. So the first project which we did in our late 20s, it was one of our early ones, and we bullied our friend from 12th standard to do this home. He had a very small plot. It was a 1,200 square foot plot. And the idea was to do a home with a courtyard, but in an unconventional way where it comes to the corner. And the idea was to see how you could use this idea of a shared space so that each small space feels larger with an internal courtyard. And I think what you see in bold there, and the aspect that I want to talk about is this idea of sense and sensibility. So we were trying to make sense of what it means to build, right? So it was part of a learning curve. We were understanding how everything you've studied or everything you're learning on the job translates to real building. So we were making sense out of what it means to build for somebody, what it means to work with a budget, what it means to work with real materials. And through that, we were trying to form a sensibility. So this project, wherein we chased both sense, we chased this idea of making sense and formulating a sensibility, when finished, actually it was fantastic, because just then with social media, it really went all over the world, and we got the recognition, and it was really nice, and we felt validated in some sense about some of the bold stuff that we were trying to do. The next project is a dialysis center that we've done in Bangalore, and if you see what's written in bold there, it was about this idea of the quest for the sublime. And so this sense of an alternate beauty, this idea of finding beauty in the unfamiliar is something that we were always preoccupied in our practice. And this was a project that sort of helped us explore that, where there was this temple and we had to do this building next to this. And we wanted to conceive the skin of this temple as probably the most muted backdrop to the temple, because the temple meant something to the neighborhood. We were building right next to it, but we didn't want it inanimated. We wanted an animated backdrop to this temple, which has a very sensual quality about it. And it is for patients who are coming in for dialysis, and I think they always look for some sort of divine support to get through whatever ailments they're going through. And we looked at reinterpreting that divine intervention through architecture as a medium by allowing light to enter the building in a more poetic way. So rather than framing the temple directly, we looked at it more in a much more subtle and abstract way where sort of light filters through. So that was what this project was about. The next project was this resort we've done in a town called Chikmagalur, which is Java Rain, and here really we looked at context as opportunity. So we didn't want to do something contextual in the sense where architecture is subservient to the context, but it's really looking at architecture which celebrates context. And in this case, it was landscape. So the whole idea of architecture over here was to look at it as a filter that kind of looks at landscape in three different ways. One is to frame distant landscape. The other is to look at how you could be cushioned with landscape. and 3 was to see how you can have an intimate relationship with landscape. So different building types looked at the relationship between building and landscape and tried to blur the edge between it. The last project is something that we've finished, we are finishing up as I speak. We are almost through. This project is really, for me, about architecture and the city. And this is something that we're really interested in the studio, as and when we get an opportunity. We don't get too many, but this was an urban campus and we were asked to do a library. It was also a competition project that we won. So in that sense, it was also important in the timeline because of that. So it's a competition that we won. It's a fairly large building, about 1 lakh square feet. And the building really was supposed to be situated on a site that connected the hostel. It's an urban campus, open campus, connects the hostel block to the rest of the campus. And students would walk through this. So the idea was to make this library almost like a non-building, almost like just manipulation of the ground, and is something that is extremely porous that people just go through. So if you see the ground, and if you look at the figure-ground relationship, we've really looked at it in a very ambiguous way, where more than it being a figure-ground relationship, it's a figured ground or a disfigured ground, so to speak, as a condition. So in that sense, it's a very political building in terms of de-institutionalizing a library and making it part of the campus and giving it back to the students. So thank you.
So I just have 2 observations, across the 3 presentations. And one is, it feels like in many ways you've measured the success of your practices through finished projects. Because we noticed that across the timelines, these marker moments that you've identified are really projects that you've completed, they've meant something to you. But I was just also wondering, were there sort of more simpler influences where, practices go through various stages of failures and experiments and whole, the travel experiences, and you briefly in jest touched upon your academic background, right? And it sort of leads me to the next question is, for you, Pronit, is to what extent do you think your stint abroad, you've done your undergrad at the AA, which is a fairly intense course. The diploma there is arguably one of the most intense courses across, across the world maybe. And do you think in many ways what you've done there so many years ago continues to influence the way you're thinking now in your practice? Or do you think that it no longer is relevant and you've moved on, the other forces of an urban practice have sort of taken over?
No, in fact, I think it's the opposite. I think I want to go back and see what I've missed, right? Because sometimes, when I chose to go back, actually literally go back, was a very conscious decision at the time, because masters at that time, the 4th and 5th year was more intense, no mercy, in terms of the education and all of that. But even then it was only 2 years was not enough, right? Because from the education that I came from.
But,
but of course, the question is that, you don't lose it. You don't lose it. You may lose it because of whatever the practice or the life or, whatever that is there. But in that sense, it's very, very important. I think that education makes a big difference. It made a big difference to me. It also gave me a lot of confidence at that time to come back and do something. My dad is an architect as well. He's very successful. I thought I would have his practice, but it didn't work out. Or be part of his practice didn't work out. I started off on my own. Like so many of us, right? There's no thing. But at the time, it gave me, some confidence too that we can do it, that we can do that.
Yeah, and I think, Sanchit, for you, it was maybe the reverse, right? It felt like you came back to an already established practice, and then your sort of stint abroad reignited something in the office, and you can see through the timeline as well. It feels like you, and specifically because you touched upon that project, it almost feels an anomaly in that timeline, right? It feels very different. and but you still included it, and then the work after that feels a lot more academic, it feels a lot more colorful, and there's another sort of lead up to it.
I think that's what, in the middle of the education, I was in India, then of course went abroad, came back while I was actually working with Dad. The thing is that, if I break down the decade-long relation that I've had with work, I think the first 2-3 years of working under the mentorship of your own father, of course was difficult, but there's so much learning. But then I would go exactly the opposite of what he said. I would say that what I learned at site or in terms of the practical needs was something that, of course, I came with a baggage from the college, and that's when I did that project. And then I knew that, of course, this can work, but not in a long-term span. So quickly learned that and kind of moved forward in terms of modulating your design frame, your lines, and then getting into that the academic role of being an architect and making meaningful spaces with timeless reactions to the space. So I think, of course, it was just the opposite for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Sujit, for me, my stint of studying abroad was in a lot of sense a great reality check. And it was a reality check that was instilled in me that still continues to tick. I think what I was forced to do when I went to study was I was forced to unlearn and learn again. And in an extremely compressed, sort of high pressure kind of an atmosphere, I was forced to do both. And I think the learnings from there of unlearning and learning continue to happen cyclically as I go through time with work. And the other thing that the education did was to build some sort of a critical apparatus within you, which is the reality check that I'm talking about. And that critical apparatus helps us position our work, understanding maybe where we are and what sort of genre it belongs to, and who are the people who are doing it better, and what do you need to do. So, there's some kind of academic, critical thinking about the work that's in place because of that education, is what I feel.
But through this exercise, do you think it was difficult for you to narrow this whole, narrow it down to 4 moments? Do you think that that was a hard exercise for you to do? And do you do that as a practice? Do you look back and do you have a discussion within the office and say, hey, look, let's look at our library of work across so many years, and then do you sort of identify certain moments that somehow, kind of helps you define new trajectories maybe, or do you feel like you're going in different directions? Values is the word I picked up from the earlier conversation with Studio Lotus. Is that something that you are looking at within the practice?
Yeah, I think maybe the word we use more is sensibilities, more than values, because maybe we tend to look at it a little more artistically, the kind of work we do. And I think sensibilities are as important as values, but I honestly feel that we don't do it actively, like you asked, but I think when you do, when you do show up for situations like this, then you're forced to kind of reflect, contemplate, and look at your work, sometimes in retrospect, to figure out trajectories, pathways, families, or whatever you want to call it within the work, and try to kind of make some sense out of like the madness that you go through every day. And secondly, was it difficult to just spin down to 4? Heck yeah, because I think everybody who's running an office here understands that there is enough amount of work that never was built. I think the work that didn't get built, that was put in the office on the drawing board, is more than the work that got built.
Which was interesting for me. That's why I pointed it out that I didn't see a project that you didn't build on the 3 timelines. And I don't know if it sort of happened at some subconscious level, saying that I shouldn't put a project that I haven't built, and and you felt the urge to actually show up only projects that you've successfully sort of put out there at site. So is that something that you want to talk about? Sanchit?
When you were talking about was it important to put down those 4 moments in your life? And honestly speaking, it was a very tough call, honestly, because I think as a firm, those projects became a base for the next project to come through. So then there are many more memories to be made, and there are many more, four of these to come through in the future as well. So it's of course difficult because when you're venturing into different typologies of work, I think there's so much that you learn from, there's so much you absorb from, and to kind of come to a consensus that, oh, okay, this defined my life as an architect would be a tough call, honestly speaking. Where it comes to actually putting down an urban project, I think that's an interesting question, because as architects, we will always be happy to see our vision there as a physical manifested space in front of us. That's when you can experience it. So I think that's with every architecture firm that we see, that whenever they're presenting, of course they want to present an unbuilt idea that they have, but then the beauty of seeing that unbuilt become built to an experience of a person going in is what gives you happiness. And honestly, you felt that at the restaurant when we were yesterday,
Yeah.
That happiness when you see a restaurant filled with people and having their own emotions. There's this sharpness, this talk in the air. That experience is what gives us happiness. You can say that, commercial fees and all can give you happiness, but to see your product being used as a bar or as a house, as a XYZ is the most beautiful feeling, and can't be, that doesn't come at a price, honestly.
Pronit, I wanted to ask you, you've been in practice for a while now, and do you think now you have sort of established a set of routines within the office that now allows you to step back a little bit and, stay a little detached and say, look, the practice might sort of run on its own engine? Do you think that's, or is that something you're thinking about in some
For
way?
me, I wish I could do that.
But is that something,
But,
that we should all think about in some sense? See, my practice is over 15 years old as well. And, let's say the practice crosses a critical phase when it's beginning to sort of achieve a level of success monetarily, critically, and so on. Is there a point you think that you should now build the engine of an office to run on its own so that you achieve a level of mentorship? Again, picking off the earlier conversation, I can't help but do that, but is that something that we should all be conscious of, you think, or are you thinking along those lines?
Not yet. Hasn't happened yet, because also what happens is that we are getting different scales of projects. You change scales, you change typology, and which we haven't dabbled into before, and you're always trying to. And as for my last slide, you're still working in the city, and you're working with codes, and you're working now in our current scenario right now. So these things need you to be there. It's not that you can just mentor somebody, or it's not like that. But yeah, that would be great.
I actually had something to say about it. When a client comes to you, honestly, he's of course investing in his property or XYZ, whatever he's doing. But then he's also at the same time investing in the idea of you being the architect of that space. So if you lose that, and of course we can all talk about being the engine and then, self-sustaining offices and all, but then what is the X factor that you have as an architect?
It's difficult.
Yeah,
You don't see it. The most successful thing that I see is Foster. No, he's mentoring.
Yeah. Mentoring. Yeah.
That's it. He's skiing and he's cycling. You see his thing. And you see him. He's the king, man. You see the kind of work that's being churned out from the name.
Yeah, that's why I set out with that disclaimer saying that, really, I think we should think about distancing the practice somehow from the faces
If that
of the
gives
practice.
you, I think if
honest-
you're okay with that, if you're okay
If
with
there's a
that,
way,
then that's what it is.
It is.
Without diluting anything, without sort of...
Yeah, but that's what, we have clients coming to say, oh, look at this, there's a Foster building, and there's a Foster building in our backyard now. Yeah, we're competing with Foster and piano, all these guys are here, with us. But their best work is not coming out from here. They're not showcasing that work. That is not happening.
What about you,
That
Smaran?
is something that you don't want to kind of get into, and we are not ready for that. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah. For you, Smaran, have your responses evolved over time? What exactly do you bring to the table? You're a partnership, there are 3 partners. What do you bring to the table, and has that evolved over time as well? Are you taking on different roles in the office, or are you sort of conditioning yourself in some way, saying that this is what I'll do and this is what I'm good at? Do you identify roles like that within the firm? Is that something that, that you think of?
Yeah, I think I have a slightly more alternate view to Sanchit and Pronit, because I really feel, you know, if you're not interested in a sort of a signature style practice where you want to come up with new kind of experiences, new identities, touch upon new sensibilities, then I think it becomes humanly impossible for one person to author all of that. So what do I try doing? I try to unearth these possibilities or these happy accidents within the office. So I'm constantly just scouting for these things to happen and hoping that it doesn't always need to come from my pencil's tip, you know, in terms of it shouldn't be a top-down thing, but how could we kind of build from something that's almost like a found object, and then you convert that into something else. So I think I'm really interested in that kind of detachment for that from that perspective, but still be involved, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think you know, trying and bringing the alternative perspective into the office every now and then, renewing that is also important, I think, which is leads me to my next question to all of you is, do you think your work is sitting in the sort of larger context, the larger, you know, the context of contemporary work in the country? And are you conscious of that? Do you want your work to break ground consistently for it to be visible and counted in a certain way? Do you want to be part of the conversations, you know, that sort of are about the critical nature of your work? You think it's important for it to be published? Do you think it's important for it to be spoken of? Is that something that you do consciously within the practice, Sanchit? Is that something that
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Why do you feel that way?
Because honestly, you know, he touched on that idea of, you know, getting recognized. Of course, you know, there is a base layer till which an architect loves being recognized. But then with time, when you're producing different kind of work, good work, if that is the definition, then comes a sort of a standard responsibility as an architect. It's just like saying that if Virat is scoring centuries, you keep understanding, like you keep expecting him to score a century, and the day he got out, today he got out at 5.
So you put pressure on yourself that way.
Look at the media talking about it, right? There is, of course, an undue pressure on you as an architect as well, that people discount, honestly speaking. If you are doing good work and then suddenly you produce something which is way off from your work or lines, then suddenly people start saying that he's lost his mojo or something. So there is an undue pressure on you when you're producing good work, and that is the base layer you decide with every project. So then that comes back to my question, that how do you define the 4 critical movements? Because that is a base layer. Every project is a base for the other project to layer it upon and further on. So it becomes an interesting study in itself. And also to kind of ideate on the idea of this, the scale of a you know, a firm growing or not, it depends on the total idea of scalability. Honestly, do you want to scale your firm? How do you want to perceive the firm? I want to see my firm being a boutique firm rather than a sort of a scalable.
So that positioning is important.
Positioning and the branding of architecture, along with the brand you're wanting to be in the market, is very important.
And for you, Pronit, because I noticed that you're working in different parts of the country, and the interesting thing about these 3 practices is that, you know, we consciously picked one from the south and the center and, you know, north. And Pronit seems to be sort of cutting across. I think maybe everyone's doing work across the country here, but you are doing large work, I think, down south. And are your responses different each time you're in a different city? And, you know, do you notice that there's some sort of regionalism at play? You know, do you have to, or is the sort of practice ethos takes over and you impose your sort of ideals wherever you work? How does that, do you think about it like that?
Yeah, it depends on the type of project. Context, of course, is a great liberator, actually, as well, instead of putting your own thing, right? Because context is so much context in India, you just surf that, right? So in that sense, for certain projects, definitely context all the way. For certain projects, more generic, and the type of project that comes. So I'm, you know, also that's a personal thing as well. I mean, when you see the best architects anywhere in the world, here in India and all, they also choose their projects, you know, because they also know that in this project you can do this and it can work like that. I can really do something good. yeah, but they won't choose something that's slightly more difficult or let's say more commercial or something. But there are good ways to do that as well. I believe that. And that's what I try to strive as well, because also maybe you don't have the choice to not to choose, right? So you sometimes you want to grow and you want to, but there are good ways to do that, and you're always striving. So in that sense, when you said that, yeah, it's yes and no for your last question, right? I mean, in that sense, depending. But I also see like all over the world, and you're seeing there are so many good projects which are not star projects, you know, in that sense. And it's really, I mean, not good for the sake, not good meaning just it's good, but good in the sense that it really kind of thought through for a normal project.
Right.
You know, for a normal commercial project or a normal which a star architect would not touch.
Yes.
You know, in that sense, to be honest. Right? We all know that thing. So that also kind of drives me as well. And of course, we also play, I mean, not through mentorship now, but at least to a position of in the office where you can kind of set up techniques, right, for the office to do, to come up with things, right? That is fun. I think that's, so I'm not getting into the mentorship mode, or I've not even thought about that. But I've really kind of like set out teams separately, that you're not doing projects in that sense, but you're doing certain techniques and certain exercises that we are interested in, which can help us for whatever scale that comes through. And that over time has is quite joyful now to kind of do, whether it works out or not. But at least
I mean, making like cloning.
Sorry?
That's cloning.
That's cloning?
Yeah, cloning of yourself within someone else with their own beliefs. I think that's an interesting idea to take your firm up, you know, in terms of scaling.
I think so.
I think maybe I'm more interested in grafting than cloning.
A little bit of you in somebody
almost
else.
like that.
No, but this is such a great conversation. I mean, I wish we could sort of keep talking, but it opens up so many different ideas on how practice, you know, is defined in all the experiences that you accumulate, you know, all the sort of trials and the experiments and all the different directions you went as you, or you picked up as you sort of build up a practice. But we'll have to leave it at that. I think it looks like we've run out of time, but hopefully we'll continue this conversation over drinks, I think maybe. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It's great talking to you. Thank you.